Virginia Franco and Claire Davis in a sec. This, it's just the last minute thing, of course, but I want to welcome everyone to today's weekly LinkedIn Live. And I'm so excited to get back together with Virginia and Claire. Hi, Claire, how are you?
Hey, everybody. It's so nice to have the band back together.
Yes, I think we, as a starting point, we should probably mention where the name came from for this.
Yes.
Because we were doing this room on Clubhouse probably about
in the spring.
Yeah,
the spring.
We were looking for a name, and Claire does resumes with Virginia, and I do some LinkedIn. So I just thought, what about Lions and Tigers and Resumes? Oh my! It just seemed like a really catchy title, but I had no idea really what I was thinking about. But it was really cool. So now
we rolled with it.
We roll, scare there too. So we don't want to scare anyone or anything like that, but definitely want to welcome everyone here and just let us know where you're in from. I know that a lot of my New Jersey folk are here too. But I got to ask the two of you, how has your summer been so far? I mean, it's officially over, I know, on the calendar, but how was it?
Well, Virginia, your summer was definitely more eventful than mine, so you go first.
I go to part-time for June and July always, so I can focus on some initiatives, and I spent the time at the beach doing that, which was wonderful. The sheen of that has now worn off. I've moved my oldest to his big boy job, my other one to college, and now I'm back to the back to school grind. So, but it was wonderful.
How about you, Claire?
The summer flew by. I've got two little ones in preschool and kindergarten, and so lots of playing with the neighborhood kids and doing a little bit of traveling and getting to explore the Pacific Northwest because we moved to Spokane 2 years ago from California, and so finally getting out and about to travel more and go visit places. It's just been nice. It's been freeing to check it out finally and have the time.
Definitely. So what I was hoping to do today is just talk a little bit about some of the changes, coming up in the fall with resumes and people going back to work and what should they or shouldn't they put on the resumes. Because we actually, I do a group on Mondays and we were talking about that now. And it's interesting to find out when you're looking on a resume, how do you suggest blocking out some of that time when you're out of work and whether it's through no fault of your own? Is it considered more normal, for want of a better word, to kind of have that gap now?
Yeah, I mean, so when it comes to a gap, many of my clients will come to me and really worry about that. I have a gap on my resume. Is it going to be the first thing they focus on? And I think if you were to mention this 2+ years ago, it would be more of a glaring issue than it really is today. I think most employers, if not all employers, are in some way affected by the pandemic and everything that went on. And so, frankly, if you're going to have a gap, this is kind of a perfect time to do it, because I think that most companies have become more empathetic and understanding of the world we're in, and so we work on different strategies to focus on things other than the gap. But I think what's most important, at least in my opinion, is what you do during the gap. So, we all have a unique career journey. Some of us had been promoted to every single role and moved our way up from the bottom to wherever we are now in the company. And some of us have moved around to a lot of different companies and it was very streamlined. And then others of us, like myself, went through layoff after layoff and merger and company closure. And so that's just sort of the reality of the job journey. And so I think what really becomes important then is highlighting and understanding that when we are in those times of waiting, those gap times, what do you do with it? And how do you document what you're up to keep yourself moving forward personally and professionally? And I think that becomes really important. So what do you think, Virginia?
Yeah, no, you said it perfectly. What I would add is that if the pandemic started in March of last year, so now we're a year and a half out. So the first thing I would recommend is that you show in your resume that the job loss was COVID related, but indicate that it was, make it clear that wasn't part of your personal performance, but part of a larger strategic, downsizing. So you could say something like team or division was laid off, and then your interviews indicate that so that there's no doubt. But now that we're 18 months out, you absolutely do need to have something to show for it. But there are lots of things besides paid employment that you can include. I can't tell you how many people I speak with that say, well, no, I wasn't really employed and I really couldn't do volunteer work because of COVID, but I helped out my friend doing this, or I helped this person do that. They were lending their skills in that way. So whatever you can do to sort of show that you've kept your skills current, or maybe added a few to your toolbox with online courses, things like that, I think is super, super helpful. But you're right. This is the time people are being more gracious around this gap. I saw this happen in 2008 too, but by 2010, memories got short. So I do wonder if the window isn't closing on COVID graciousness.
Someone asked me a question in our group yesterday, which I didn't have the answer to, and I'd love to get some feedback. Is it appropriate, or should you put down in a resume that you're fully vaccinated? Or is it something that's because if I'm applying for a job, if I'm fully vaccinated on there, and not maybe in bells and whistles, but it might help from the perspective of when I'm looking for someone, not having to have a difficult discussion. And I don't know what the answer is to that because it's so new.
Yeah. I was in a small group discussion where we talked about this, and this was before the president came out with his corporate mandate. But our consensus was that this is still sort of a political hot potato, depending on where you live and the industry you're in. And so we felt that the resume wasn't a place to put it, but where it was appropriate to put it is in an application. So when you are submitting it online. But vaccines are still private. If you go into the hospital, they can't ask you what vaccine you had, all those sorts of things. And so from a privacy issue, I at this point, I'm still saying don't put it on your resume. It might change in a week or so, but right now that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I resonate with you on that, Virginia. I feel like the resume just maybe isn't the place for it, really, in short. Now, it doesn't mean that it's not important to your job search and that it won't come up, even in an interview. And I know there are some things that should and shouldn't be asked, but
that a person can ask on an interview, like, are you COVID? Do you have the COVID vaccine? Or, that's a whole different, can of worms. What are you allowed to ask and not ask, and how do you answer that?
Well, now it's mandated if the company is larger than 100, so it could be a deal breaker. So at that, I'm not a HR professional, or an employment lawyer, but it seems to me that if you are, disclose it.
I think it depends also on, just like any job you're applying for, it's so important to start with research. If you have specific values that you want to have reflected within the company where you work, or if you want to know that they're on a trajectory that you believe in, or that they have the leadership training you're craving, it's all about researching that company ahead of time. So again, if you find that this is a company where vaccination is going to be mandatory, like a public service or companies over 100 or healthcare, knowing that going in can really help with how you position yourself throughout the whole journey, your resume to your interview prep and even your networking, your outreach ahead of time.
That's such a good point. And companies are not being shy on their stance on it, on either side of the fence. So if you resonate with one side versus the other, then that should be part of your research and add those companies to your target list.
I won't lie. I've got probably in the last month, 3 different clients who reached out just to ask, Claire, do you know of companies that are on either side of the fence of the vaccination conversation? The reality is, things are constantly changing, and it's truly up to each job seeker to do that due diligence, just like they would otherwise for every other part of the reason they would join a company when they're identifying which company they want to work for. So it's so important to do that deep dive ahead of time.
Well, I definitely want to, at this point, just shout out to some of the people on the call. I have a user from Iowa.
Hey.
Got Maria Ford, Jersey. I have another from the UK. I got Christopher Kemp from Long Island, New York. Christopher Johnson on his yesterday from Metropolitan Detroit. And we're going to be, syncing up here later on. Carol McCullough. We have my Jersey clan here. Also, Diane Hammer, Dan Roth. One of the goodies. And
Hey.
Goodies too, and of course Alex Freund from Princeton, New Jersey, best place there. So I got to ask. There's some questions that have just come up here in the chat, and this is an IT question, which is very relevant in general. Do you need to be careful in certain skills? Like, do you look too old if you add expertise in certain industries or fields, as opposed to even the title? Like, you're not a computer programmer anymore; you're a developer.
Mm.
Yeah. Technology evolves at lightning pace. What I always use as my guideline are a series of job postings. I ask my clients to send me a handful, and the technologies that are listed on there are what I include. And if they're not, I omit them. But what is good about having a technology skills list and I only do that, I should back up. I only create a technology skills list when it's clear that certain software is called for in the job. But that's something that you can add and delete based on the particular role that you're targeting.
So
you don't want to put that Microsoft Word 1997 or
yeah.
What was that old? I can't remember. Word Perfect.
Yeah.
I think for me, there's a lot of things we all talk about certain things like you don't want to do, like you don't want to have an AOL.com email address. And, even the wording and things. And I've still seen people have their addresses on there, which is on a resume. That goes back to the days you mailed them and faxed them in. So I now wonder, do you even need to have a home phone and a cell phone or an office?
Just cell.
Right.
Yeah. I agree. Just sell. Yeah. I mean, if you're still working from your AOL address, like, there are just some things that scream, hey, 1998, or 2005. And that's okay. As long as it could be presented as a little less tech savvy. And then maybe that could turn into a slight feeling of being out of touch. So, it's important to really look at those key details and make sure that what you are including is positioning, yourself in the best light and the most relevant light. So Virginia, I love what you shared there is you have your client send you a few different job postings so that you know what to include, because here's the deal, like whatever we're going after, as long as you do that research ahead of time, so you look at what the industry standards are, what's being used, you're checking out current job postings, not old ones, current ones, because like Virginia said, tech is moving at lightning speed. So making sure you're not behind the 8 ball, just simply by seeing what people are asking of you, right? And so it's just a good gauge to go by so that you can make sure that you're on point and you're not getting left in the dust. But it's true.
I still see job postings that they'll say that they want MS Office, which I sort of take a little bit of issue with, because I've always felt like unless you're a resume writer or an administrative assistant where you sort of need to be a master word user, everyone assumes that you know the basics. But Excel is critical for certain roles, especially you need to know VLOOKUPs, is that what they're called, and pivot tables and all that stuff that I don't understand. And then PowerPoint for presentations. So those are the two parts of Microsoft Office where I do call out when it's clear that the role needs them.
Yeah.
So one question I wonder is, how far back on a resume do you need to go? You need to go back 10 years, 5 years, 1 page, 2 pages, because people like myself, we've been around for many, many years. And I know that this is, they're gonna find you on LinkedIn. From a resume standpoint, how relevant is that older experience in terms of listing it?
So I'm old as well. I've been writing since the 20th century. I tell people that when I am writing for someone in an executive job search, I go back as far as 15 years. I synopsize earlier experience, I remove dates from it, and I put it under an earlier experience section. when it comes to mid-level folks, I will often focus more on the past 10 years and then adopt that same approach for earlier experience. Claire, what are your thoughts on that?
Virginia, you and I are so similar in that. I also sort of curtail the information that goes beyond 15 years, though there are a fair amount of people who wonder, hey, okay, what I was doing 10, 15 years ago was my favorite thing of my career, and I want to pivot back to that. So, right now I'm working with a gentleman who wants to get back into tech sales, and he sort of found himself in the security space for the last 15 years, but he wants to go back into focusing more on tech. So there are ways that I like to position candidates with some of those older accomplishments. But here's the thing again, if you're moving into pivoting toward a career that you had more relevant experience with 15 plus years ago, especially if it's a place like tech, you have to showcase how even though you haven't been active in that specific arena, you've been keeping up with it all this time. Because you may have brought some incredible progress 15 plus years ago, but if you're not on the bubble now, if you're not still in touch with the market now, the stuff that you probably were able to do 15 plus years ago, it may or may not be as impactful simply because the technology changes so quickly and the way that we do business changes so quickly. So, but I'm with you. Yeah. If it's an executive, I typically stick to 15, 20 years and no longer, because that's really when the most relevant experience, can be brought forward. And I mean, frankly, ask me what I had for breakfast last week. I don't know.
Yeah.
So I think, time really does play a part in not only what we are able to accomplish, but how well we're still able to access that expertise as time goes on.
Well, and I'll add that when I'm writing a LinkedIn profile, with the resume, I have the luxury of making the person timeless. Nobody knows that, if they're 35 or 85, I've said that before, but LinkedIn, if you omit a job, there's no way for the reader to see it really. So there's a couple different approaches I use, but if there is a killer job that happened 18 years ago and it is super relevant to the target, I am not afraid to put it. I am not concerned about age discrimination in that case. I feel like the importance of the job outweighs that. I'll include it, and I don't care if it happened in 1998.
Yeah.
So I have a question from Alex. Why is the resume important when recruiters use LinkedIn for sourcing? LinkedIn has a picture and is brief and organized. A recruiter finds what he or she needs. And this is a question, I get this a lot too. LinkedIn should not be a resume. There's different ways to brand, but from a recruiting standpoint, what's the benefit to doing both or putting yourself out there?
I guess, go ahead, Virginia.
You go ahead.
So Alex, that's a really great question, because I hear this a lot too as well. Can I just do my LinkedIn? It's the same thing. But when it comes to the job search, what I try to encourage everyone to understand is that it's not a siloed approach. It can't just be your LinkedIn profile. It can't just be having a terrific resume. It can't just be knowing somebody in the industry. It's a full court press. So my answer to that question is that having an updated LinkedIn profile is critical. So is actually posting on LinkedIn, because like Alex said, he looks and sources the majority of his candidates right here on the platform. So if you're not here and not visible, you're really missing the boat. So my answer to that question is yes. I mean, I think that every recruiter has their own way of going about things. I think sometimes even the resume feels like a checked box after the process has begun, or even after a great referral has been made. But it really does, for me, take that full 360-degree approach where you're incorporating many elements to represent your brand. So, for example, even if you're a business owner, you've got to have a resume, or if you can even call it a sales page if you want. But because if you don't nail down those specific measurables that help your clients get results, no one's going to understand how you help them win. So it takes all of those different factors. You've got to have an online presence. You've got to get your resume together. You need a cover letter. You've got to put those thank yous out there to people who have taken the time to interview you and speak with you. And it's a full court press for me.
So Christine Dykman is, I'm going to post a question which I've never heard before, and I don't know the answer to it. But she works with people in transition, and she had this question: someone changing their gender through surgery, does that go on a resume? And as I know, LinkedIn has that he/she thing. So I'm just wondering, and this is like a whole new world. What do you do about that?
Well, LinkedIn does, on your LinkedIn, you can choose your pronouns. And I would imagine this person's I don't know if the person's pronouns change according to the surgery. If I wouldn't reference a surgery on a resume, only because it might open up a can of worms around, is the person ready to go back? Do they have recovery time? Like all sorts of things. The resume is the document in the LinkedIn is a document you use to get yourself in the door. It's not the place where you list everything in the kitchen sink. It is your brochure, not your blueprint. But you can, again, use your pronouns after your name, just like you would include your any initials that reflect certifications that are relevant to your job target in your on your name at the top of the contact information.
Yeah, because you also have, when you're filling out the mail, if you want to identify male, female, do not want to identify. I mean, and I know that's done for certain statistical reasons, for sure. So another question, are you implying you might want to remove old history, et cetera, on LinkedIn? What are the circumstances? Should you ever remove it? I would say you never want to remove anything.
I remove stuff that's not relevant to the target. Because once you go far back, to me, I don't think you have to worry as much about the gap. Like if you scooped ice cream or at Baskin Robbins to get you through a gap, to me, that's not relevant. And I'm not worried about a gap that happened between 2002 and 2004. What do you think, Kenneth?
Well, the reason I put down everything on my LinkedIn profile, honestly, is connecting with people, because you just don't know what the commonality is. I mean, I reached out to someone who I worked with back at Prudential Healthcare Aetna, and I reached out to them because I lost track of them, and it's just a way to stay in touch. Now, from a job seeker perspective, you never know, instead of having to Google them. So from that perspective, it's easier to find them that way. So I'm not looking
but then that would be relevant, because if you are looking to stay in that industry, for instance, then you would keep it on. So there's different reasons to keep photos on. But yeah, I agree with that. Can I answer the question about LinkedIn Recruiter?
Absolutely.
So that Alex Freund asked. Thank you, Alex. To me, the best reason to have a resume is that you can customize it. You can't customize your LinkedIn and control what people see. The recruiter wants that customized resume so that they can pass it on and present you to their client. And then they're going to shop it around to their leadership team, and it's going to get circulated, down through the interview funnel. So what Claire said, they're all complementary tools that you need in your job search toolkit, but the resume is still the gold standard to get in front of people. But at least the LinkedIn got you found through LinkedIn Recruiter, but then the other one, so they serve, dual purposes.
Yeah.
I think one of the challenges I find a lot is dealing with the terminology that's out there. There's a whole skill set there's a disconnect with skill sets that are out there, and so many people are looking for jobs, and they don't have the quote unquote skills, and it's really more about marketing yourself to do that. And I know it's I don't know what the answer is. Again, I just acknowledge that it's out there. There's jobs out there. There's people that could probably fill the jobs, but how do you position yourself that even though you don't have every single bullet point on their job spec, that you can get the opportunity to apply?
You mean that they have the skills, but they're not, because they're called different things, are not matching? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, or at the same time, if I'm looking for a job in finance or in pharma, and I have the skills that are transferable or general, but I'm not in that industry, how do I get past that from a hiring manager company perspective?
Yeah, you first and foremost, you bypass applying online as the first way of getting in, because the person in that industry or in that role is always going to trump you on keywords. You can't add finance to your resume if you haven't been in that industry. But you have documents that show how the skills are transferable. Your LinkedIn tells that story, and you reach out to people and keep asking for names and tell your story of how this pivot makes sense and how you're a good fit. All it takes is one person to be willing to take a risk. ATS is never going to take a risk.
Right. That's such a good point. ATS, the ATS system is not your bud.
They do not.
It's not your friend.
I mean, it's hard enough even when it is a perfect match, but when you are trying to when you're a career changer, it's brutal.
Yeah. I think it really lends itself to the approach that I encourage people to take in this situation is to start those informational interviews early on, because that's how you make inroads with the right people and start seeing what the industry is like and having conversations with people who are there and can express the challenges within the industry in real time, in their own words. Because a lot of industries, there are transferable skills among every industry in some sense, I'm telling you. So I think that when you have a chance to get on the phone with people and have a quick coffee chat and just hear what they're dealing with and just see if they'll give you a little bit of the inside track on that, that will also help job seekers recognize where they have unique skills that they could lend in the first place. Because a lot of people, so when they want to transition into medical sales, for example, and they're terrified that they would ever even get it. They don't think they'd even get a chance because they haven't done consultative selling. They haven't gone through, they haven't worked specifically with orthopedic surgeons or whatever the case may be. But if they have a chance to come in and speak with some people who are there, then they can identify what they do bring to the table that would be relevant for that industry. And that's where you win. That's where you make the right connection, you tell your story, and you can relate it with the experience you do have or the vision you do have for how it could be done with your added value that you bring. And then you're off to the races. So I think that's a really great point. And, it does take that additional networking to sort of data mine what those transferable things would be. Because sometimes you don't even realize it.
Yeah. And it's also, I think, easiest to land more quickly if you, instead of trying to do a giant leap, if you do sort of a mini leap or a micro pivot. So if you wanted to go from healthcare to big tech, you might try to work for a technology company that supports the healthcare industry. Yeah. And then you spend some time there, and then you make your next move to to a FANG company or something like that. But those micro pivots are easier story to tell and to convince someone to take a risk. It feels like less of a risk to the hiring manager.
And more of like a linear connection. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Claire. I don't mean to interrupt.
No, that's I completely agree. When you're doing that outreach too, sometimes it's easier for the person on the other end who's like, oh, Claire's trying to chat with me about, my experience, and, she's a writer and I'm a software developer, right? So if it can be, like you said, Virginia, a micro pivot where two of the industries at least have some kind of parallel, then it makes sense too, and your networking can help.
I was going
to read the comments.
Before anything else, one thing I always observe is most people don't get the references lined up in advance, and then they have to really scramble. And it's not the same. It's a way to reconnect with someone, because you're going to want to have those people on the back burner. So, Virginia, was there a specific question you wanted to comment on?
Oh, no, I was just reading the comments about the gender surgery question.
And this is where what Deborah brings up. Very difficult to get people to take a leap of faith. Relationships win the day. I can tell you from firsthand experience, when my kids were younger and I went to all the athletic events and I would see the moms and dads there and we'd be talking, you don't see them as anything more than your kids' parents. But then when you start talking to them about their jobs and what they're looking for, and you can say, well, I know someone, and you've built that relationship. You just never know where it's going to go. And you don't know. I actually started when I was at work. I looked up the people on LinkedIn. that I was next to at the games. And I was like, oh
Yeah.
God, this is who this person is.
Networking happens in the weirdest places. I can't tell you how many clients I got from sitting in the dugouts and basketball stadiums and football fields. So,
yes.
Absolutely.
I mean, people want to do business with people they like. You know, I mean, I think I'm afraid to do it today because I'm sure it's a billion, but I searched just on LinkedIn alone, sales resume writers, and it was like some odd million of us. And I thought, okay, what really, how many ways can you write a resume differently? I mean, I'm sure there's oodles of advice online, right? But in the end, I think people just want to work with people that they trust and know have their back. So when you're sitting there in the dugout, you've got that commonality. They get to know you as a person, and then they see, oh my gosh, you also could really help me in this area, Virginia. Like that's beautiful. That's what good business is. I love that.
So here's someone that you should talk to.
Yeah.
It's a fast pass to interviewing.
That's how we found every pediatrician we have, all of our hairdressers, every good Mexican restaurant in town, because we love tacos.
That's right.
It's all word of mouth marketing. It's the best.
And Alex brings up a point, and it's true. People hire for personality and select for skills. So the question then is, how do you interject that personality into marketing collateral resume? Like, I put things on my profile on LinkedIn that share a little bit about me. And it's and again, you want to be somewhat genuine. So I would ask the two of you, how can you interject that, whether maybe not a resume, but just in general, maybe you have a marketing blurb or something.
Oh, Alex with the killer questions.
Yeah.
So yeah, LinkedIn is conversational. That's the about section is the perfect place to inject your personality and show what's important to you. And what I always make sure to do in the resume in the summary section is I usually will include something when it's relevant that reflects what they're passionate about, whether it's a leadership approach or a particular social issue that's relevant to the job search that they're targeting. And I just add that little one-liner in, and that again injects the personality.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an opportunity for people to get to know you among all the other candidates with the same keywords. So the differentiator really is your story, and exactly what you're sharing, Virginia.
Yeah.
That summary becomes critical because numbers speak volumes, but stories really stick. So it comes down to, right? I mean, and that's the chance. That's also the argument that I have for the cover letter. It's another opportunity. Many people skip the cover letter, but really it's another opportunity where you're able to give that injection of personality and also custom tailor it to them, right? So the document is really not all about us. I mean, of course it's about our career history, it's our resume, but really what we're writing is so that we can place ourselves as the solution to a company's issue. And so same thing with the cover letter, you get to connect with them in the ways that you've researched and deemed are important. So that's a really great way to do it.
Even when you send a follow-up email, thank you email, you have another opportunity to sell yourself. It's not just thank you for taking the time.
Yeah. And I think the cover story on LinkedIn is a way to show your smile. So, I'm not saying you should throw a one-liner joke in there, but there's a way to convey a little bit of personality in the cover story.
Yeah.
So Scott brings up a point which we talk about a lot in our job search groups about the ability to take on the age factor, acknowledging your experience. I always say position yourself as a mentor, be willing to take chances. I mean, a lot of the people that are interviewing this now are basically my kids. I'm interviewing with someone who's my older son, and I also say, don't forget how intimidated they may be by you. It works both ways. But I wondered to get your thoughts about that.
So the age discrimination issue, I feel like there's two ways that you can address it, or you need to think about it. One is you need to understand the biases against us poor baby boomers and Gen Xers. And then figure out what the positives are and capitalize on those. So the negatives are that they think that we suck at technology, right? That we think we're the smartest person in the room, and that we don't play well with others. And so what you do to mitigate that is you throw out your AOL email, you list current technologies, you talk about things that you've continued to learn and show that you embrace continued learning. You show you're a team player by using words like collaborate and partnership. And that sort of mitigates that. Now, the strength of being old is that you know more people, that you're in a position to mentor. So I love the idea of stressing mentorship. But if you're in sales, your Rolodex, I sound old again, is huge. And so it's big and it's expansive. So show that on the resume. You're going to have way more connections than someone who's 15 years younger than you. So think about how you can capitalize on that.
That's such brilliant advice, Virginia. And really, when you have been in the industry long enough and you've worked with many clients, ideally in the field where you're going after, or even if you haven't, likely you've built that confidence by doing. And so now is the time then to go and connect with those real customers where you would maybe be calling on them, or maybe you've called on them before and they're still relevant to what you're going after. That's a powerful story. I got a job once. I was the youngest candidate for this company, this medical sales company. And I think that I was up against 15 people he was interviewing in one day. But before I went to the interview, I researched and found out, hey, one of my old clients is one of their targets. And so I think anybody can put that approach together. It's just, you go and identify what's important to the company. And if you bring that forward, age tends to fall away in a sense, because really, while important, if you're willing to do the research and you're willing to also be a continuous learner. So like you were saying, feeling like maybe you're not up to date on technology or something like that, show that you are. Go do a cover story on LinkedIn, go read some of the newer sales technique books, and make yourself relevant, because it's at some point, everybody is on an even playing field once they're in the industry for a while. So it's those who continue to learn that I find become the most successful, and that they have the easier time of transitioning and pivoting to industries that they desire, because they're willing to keep going after it.
Agree. And another super cool thing about being older is that we have been through corporate ups and downs more so than younger people. So we were we were in the recession, we were in the pandemic, and then we were in the boom, the boom period. And companies want to see that you can support a company during good times and bad. And if you have more than one example of that, that trumps the person that just has one example, I think.
I would tell this story. I wouldn't tell it this way now, but I was a computer programmer on call with a beeper way back when, and I had to do a lot of tasks.
You're old, Kenneth.
Yeah.
What's a beeper, Kenneth?
Beeper, but the point is, nowadays that was working from home back then, and you had to fix problems, you had to deal with stuff on the fly. We're all working remotely now. I wouldn't position myself as saying I'm a beeper type person, but I would talk about your challenges and how you're able to work with all different teams under pressure, however you want to portray it. But having gone through those experiences, and even being able to know, it's all about the words you use. If I ever said beeper or pager or something like that, they say, what is that? Because most people don't know what it is.
Yeah. It's okay. My cousin asked me who Michael Jackson was last month.
I led a Y2K communications effort.
The funny thing is that people don't know what it's like. Some people don't know what it's like pre-internet. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but you had to deal with things then. Now it's a little different.
Yeah. It's true. It's true.
So this is another thing.
I don't miss beepers, by the way. I'm glad it's gone.
My husband still carries a beeper. It's okay. It's cool.
I was actually beeped one time on the way to going to a Thanksgiving dinner down the shore here in New Jersey, and I had to pull over and talk through the problem. And the issue was, and this is again, back then there was a system that could not accept the fifth week of the month, because it was only for 4 weeks, 4 weeks a month. That fifth week, it was just an old program. They hadn't figured it out. it was just annoying. And now we take that stuff for granted. Now, again, it's not the story I would tell someone on a job interview, but I would just talk about how I was able to handle something. And I think we'll have different learned experiences. You know, Y2K, who remembers when Y2K, nothing happened?
But we thought it might.
We weren't sure.
And then it became about the when it's the weird date, you know, what's going to happen. And I want to thank you two very much for taking the time today, Claire and Virginia. I know that we have a lot of different things going on, and we still have to decide if we're going to actually go back to Lunch Club. But that brings me to the thing: if LinkedIn does come out with the voice activator, the voice software here, what do you think? What do you think about that?
I think that it's an interesting addition. LinkedIn, hello LinkedIn. But LinkedIn has been rolling out a lot of really interesting updates this year, dropping some in, pulling some out. I hear stories are quickly are about to go away. For me, I love going live because I being so after remote schooling and remote working, I really enjoy and crave seeing people's faces. So for me, I enjoy live. Now, is it a little easier to jump on Clubhouse sometimes when I'm on the go in my car, driving the kids to school and put one earbud in? Yeah, you bet. But there's something about seeing people live, seeing their expressions, and feeling like you can break that barrier and get to know somebody even better. That's why I think that the profile, the intro video has done well, you know, is slowly catching on. I see more and more job seekers slowly adding this because they see that, okay, this is a way I'm able to put my face to the name and not just a static photo, which, you know, I mean, here we are. This is what we look like today, right now, right? So I'm excited that live is here. I'm glad that live is sticking around, and I'll be curious to see how the audio version goes. What do you think, Virginia?
I mean, I'm going to reserve judgment to see how LinkedIn rolls it out, but I will try anything once. And then I reserve the right to bitch about it or praise it. That's sort of how I always approach every new thing that comes my way with this stuff. So,
yeah.
So I want to give you the opportunity to talk a little bit about your businesses and what you're looking to do and how you can help and support people, because I appreciate you very much, but I want you to, you know, to have the opportunity to, you know, talk a little bit about what you can do for the people on the call.
Sure. Yeah. So, if you don't mind, I'll jump in really quick. So I'm Claire Davis, for those of us who haven't met, though it's so nice to see so many familiar faces in the chat. And I help sales leaders get better jobs and make more money with exactly what we're talking about here today: resumes, LinkedIn profiles, cover letters, brag books, and interview prep. So what's a brag book? Oh, a brag book. It's another name for a professional portfolio. So essentially we take the big accomplishments and the exciting things, the things you're proud about having done in your career, and we put it together in something you can physically bring with you to the interview. That's an additional piece to support you and your resume in that moment. So many times, you know, I've been in an interview and pulled the brag book out and could really explain and show a little deeper and then leave it with that hiring manager. And it's really made a difference. It's made a difference. So anyway, if you ever want to connect with me, I absolutely welcome it. I'm at Claire M. Davis, or you can find me at tractionresume.com. But I love what I do, and I'm passionate about helping job seekers because, especially the last couple of years, it's been some really tricky times. And having been through 4 layoffs myself and getting back on the road successfully through those challenging times, I resonate, and there is a lot of hope out there, and there's wonderful people like you guys, you know, Kenneth and Virginia, who are completely dedicated to sharing these kinds of strategies so openly and honestly for free right here on this platform. You know, if you can work with us one-on-one, awesome. If not, people like these guys are here really leading the way and sharing a lot of incredible resources right here on LinkedIn. So I'm just grateful to be among you.
Gosh, I have been writing resumes one-on-one for people for years. I write anyone's career marketing material. I mostly work with people that are targeting executive roles or who have really complicated stories to tell. But I recently, I launched a startup last year with 2 other folks in our industry, and we took all of our profits from 2020 and invested it in a new site that we launched last week. We have some exciting things coming to be announced in a couple weeks, but it's called Job Search Journey. We recognize that there is a lack of job search equity, and we want to level the playing field by giving everyone access to high quality and very affordable job search tools created by people that do this day in and day out one-on-one. So check out the site. It's got predictive intelligence and intuitive blah, 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 and
all the things.
That's amazing, because I've kind of looked at what you've been doing with on the side, and I'm really excited about that. I think it's so important to share this information in the best way possible with as many people.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people coming off the back into the workforce now that the unemployment benefits are ending. So hopefully we can help people. So
I want to thank the two of you for joining me today. I really, really appreciate it. We have Washington State here, and Charlotte, North Carolina, and New Jersey in the house. So we have a shout out there. Thanks a lot. We'll be able to, watch the recording anytime, reach out to us. Have a great day, everyone, and stay safe.
Thanks, Kenneth. Thank you guys so much.
Thanks, guys.